Work is the effort we put into something to achieve a result. Simple definition, but living it well is a lot more complex. In this episode, I sit down with Jake, a former structural engineer turned entrepreneur and coach, to explore what happens when the structure of your life no longer supports the way you want to live. Jake uses an analogy I love: a strong column with a weak beam. You can keep adding pressure, but eventually something fails. For many people, that's their work. They're progressing the way the company wants them to progress, not necessarily the way they want to grow in life. We talk about redefining success, getting crystal clear on the lifestyle you want, and moving beyond words on a page to actually putting that clarity into practice. This conversation is about strengthening those columns in your life, your values, relationships, health, and purpose, so you can show up the way you want to show up. Because let's face it, most people can say what they want, but they don't know how to actually build it. That's where Jake's work through Actively Human comes in, helping people engineer a better foundation for real growth, reconnect with the people that matter, and stop being managed by their work so they can actually be led in their life. Let's roll right in. All right, welcome to the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. Today we've got Jake Kennington. He was a structural engineer who spent over a decade climbing the corporate ladder, but life changed when he became a husband and a father, and he has now taken his work into what he now calls actively human. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here. This is our first time meeting, but glad to be on the show and chat today. This is going to be fun.
No, awesome. I love the fact that you're an engineer too, myself, or was an engineer. I'm material science engineering, so that's super cool. So, Jake, can you define work for us today? How do you define work?
Yeah, I love these words that seem so simple, but you ask the definition. It's like, yeah, what does that even mean? I guess I would say work is any effort that we put into something for some sort of particular result. And I leave that kind of open-ended or vague because I think work, we tend to think of work as like what we do as a profession, which is obviously true. But, as a father and a husband, it takes a lot of work to be a dad and a spouse, right? And so it's just effort that we have to put in to try to achieve some sort of result. That's kind of how I would define it loosely.
No, I love that. So, walk us through, Jake, that experience you had when you were that structural engineer, and I guess the results that you were or were not getting that kind of transformed you to take a different path with your work.
Yeah, my origin story or my path in the past has been probably typical of a lot of your listeners, and so I'm happy to share this. But I found civil engineering when I was in college. I was a math major for a long time, and then I went mechanical, and then kind of jumped around and I found civil, which for me was always structural engineering. Loved that. It's kind of my first career and first passion that I had as an adult in the professional sense. And so shortly thereafter, right as I was about to graduate from college, I meet my wife. We get married. We have 4 kids along the way, and I just went over kind of almost 15 years in 2 sentences. But yeah, what happened was I wasn't miserable or unhappy by any stretch of the imagination, but what happened was life changed. So I became an engineer when I was single, young. I was in my 20s. I turned 40, next year in February. And so life has this way of changing. And like I said, I was married and had 4 kids. And so my priorities shifted as life shifted. And that's not to say that my past life or my past experience as an engineer wasn't great. It's just that now I value different things. And so for me, I made this conscious decision to change how I show up every day. And what that meant for me was I didn't want to necessarily trade my time for money. I got sick of paying somebody or giving somebody an hour of my time and them giving me $50. Like that felt like, man, this is it. Like I'm going to give my life away for the next 30 or 40 years, just so that I can pay the bills and sacrifice that time away from my family. And so for me, the light bulb moment was like, well, how do I do this? How do I still provide for my family, but maybe not trade my time for money? And the only way that I could think of to do that was to become an entrepreneur, to own my own
Mm.
business and to leverage my skills and my talents so that I could still provide for my family and impact other people, but also get some of my time back.
No, I love that, Jake. So, walk us through how you started Actively Human then.
Yeah. So what happens is if your listeners are going through something like this, where they put all their eggs in one basket, so to speak, they got this career, uh, they have this job, and it again pays for the things that they need, and it's a little bit of an existential crisis of like, man, things are good, right? And I love the title of your show, "Work Sucks and I Like It," right? It's like it's kind of this love
Yeah.
hate thing going on with work, and that's how I felt. And the issue there is you get stuck really quick because you're like, there's this sunk cost fallacy of like, what else would I do, and this is the only thing I know how to do. And so for me, it was quite painful for a couple of years, of being like, do you just burn everything down that you've kind of invested your time and effort into and start something new, or do you just suck it up, and go with the flow and be like, well, it's not that bad. And to me, it was kind of this trap was either or thinking. It was like I either have to stay in my career that I picked 15 years ago that no longer serves me, or I have to do something completely new and start over. And what I found out, at least in my experience, was that was flawed logic. It wasn't as black and white. It wasn't either or, it could be both and. And the reason that worked for me is what happened is I actually, instead of not doing engineering anymore, I actually work 4 days a week as an engineer still. And so I scaled back my hours earlier this year to go from 5 days to four. And I tell people that I work 4 days a week. They go, oh, 4 10s. And I'm like, no, 4 8s. Like I work 32 hours a week. Um, and I do find joy and fulfillment in that, but I'm slowly scaling that back so that I can do more of the work that I find meaningful and impactful, which is what I do with Actively Human. And it's been profound for me. It's 1 day a week, a little bit more than 1 day a week that I get to spend time on that coaching practice. For the last 2 years, I've worked primarily one-on-one with individuals, working with them on their personal development. And just this next year, early 2026, I'm launching a group program, which I'm really excited about.
Congrats, Jake. No, that's awesome. So I'd love to kind of like dive into the philosophy of actively human, especially as a engineer, right? So you can play all the
Yeah.
different analogy with structures and stuff. Can you kind of talk to that? How did you take your engineering practice and set this as the foundation, the structure for this new endeavor that you're taking on?
Oh, this is a great setup for me. Yeah, so I love my engineering roots. And like I said, I still am a structural engineer 4 days a week. Ironically, I do work with a lot of engineers and technical professionals, people that have gone to college and maybe are a little more left brained than right brained. And I love working with those people because those are my people. That's the way I think. And I think there's great strength in who we are and how we identify, as far as introverted, maybe a little more quiet, maybe left brained, maybe logical. But there's this flip side to that where sometimes we get in our own way, right? And we overthink things or overanalyze stuff, and we don't get to the action part. And so, one analogy I'll throw out there that I shared in it was a conference I spoke at earlier this year, back in February. There's this concept in structural engineering called strong column, weak beam. And I hate the name of the concept because engineers don't design anything to be weak. And so I always flip that and I say it should be called strong beam, stronger column. But the idea is that there's a relative strength in a column versus a beam. And I say relative because they're both strong, but one's stronger than the other. And the reason is because the beam is the horizontal member, right? It's something that's over your head on the roof or under your feet on the floor. And if that were to fail or break, it wouldn't be a good thing, but at least it would be somewhat local. It'd be in one spot. But if a column, which is the vertical member that runs down in your wall or out in the middle of space and holds up a floor or a ceiling, if a column were to collapse, that would be more catastrophic, right? That would be a big problem and potentially could bring the whole structure down. And the reason I share that analogy is because the same is true in life. Like our job, what we do for work, using the word that you asked at the beginning, what we do professionally, if we're being honest with ourselves, although it feels super important, it is a beam and it is important.
Mm.
But our lives, who we are, how we show up for our families, our physical health, our spiritual health, all these other things that we we say, quote unquote, are important, they are the most important thing. And if those were to fail, that would be much more catastrophic than our career failing.
I love that, Jake. No, that's a beautiful analogy. So when you working with someone, right? So how do you see their columns and beams, if you will, in their life? Like walk us through that, please. That's super cool. I love this angle.
Yeah. So with Actively Human, what like I said, what I've been doing for the last 2 years is one-on-one coaching with individuals. I've worked with people that are just employees working a 9 to 5 that are kind of thinking, you know, I don't know if this is it. Should I switch careers? Is it just the wrong company? Is it me? Like, am I not showing up, as engaged as I should be? And then I've worked with founders and business owners and entrepreneurs. I've worked in a couple small groups. I've seen a lot of different people, and I've worked with them. And what we primarily focus on is strengthening their columns, right? Is what we say, like strengthening the columns. Not that the beam will take care of itself, but oftentimes, at work we have a manager or supervisor or coach or somebody that's there to help us. That usually the technical aspect of things like gets taken care of kind of on the job, so to speak. We still put time and effort into those things, but that happens in our kind of 8 hour workday. But what falls by the wayside is the strengthening of the columns or ourselves, right? And so what I focus on with my clients is a three-part framework. It's called the REDAC framework, REDAC, and that stands for redefine, realign, and reconnect. And so it's really simple. I like three because it's simple. Any more than three, you get lost and you forget. But redefine means redefine success for what success means for you in this phase of life, right? So it's really easy to just follow the guy in the cubicle next to you or your boss or your neighbor or your dad, do what they did. And that's fine if that's what works for you. But you got to get really clear on the lifestyle you want, the type of work you want, the type of home life you want, and what I say is like what kind of success you want, what success means for you. So that's what we work on first and foremost. The second part is realign. And so once you have that definition of what success is, now that's great. That's a concept. It's a theory. It's words on a page. Now you have to go and put that into practice and make sure that you're showing up in the way that you want to show up. And then the last part, which sometimes catches people by surprise, and I think it's what people need, but they don't often understand it's what they want. It's reconnecting with the people that they love and the people that they care about most. And I think we're just not honest with ourselves enough. We think we are connected to our spouses and our kids and the people we care about, but yet we don't give them the time and attention and presence that they need and that we need. And so the byproduct of kind of taking this definition of success and then taking your life and aligning it with that is that inevitably you reconnect with the people that are closest to you.
No, that's awesome. I mean, the reconnect part is tough sometimes too, right? You mentioned earlier trading time for money, right? So the whole work life balance, I can only imagine having, 4 kids and a family, to no, for sure. So, Jake, when you're walking people through, I love this 3R model here that you've got. What are people saying they want to redefine? I'm very curious. I know you can't, disclose names here, but in general, what have you been seeing with the conversation with that? What are people trying to redefine today with their work, what they're doing, how they show up?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I worked with a guy, just for confidentiality or privacy reasons. We'll call him John, but he worked with me for 16 weeks. This was one on one. He owns an engineering firm here locally in Utah, and he's got so he had about 10 or 12 years of experience working for other people, being an employee. And he got to the point where a lot of us get where we're like, man, I'm slaving away for this group, these people, and I'm getting all these skills. I could probably do this on my own, right? I
Mm.
could branch out and do my own thing, control my own destiny. So he did that about 4 years ago now. He started his own company. And from the outside, like for me and you looking from the outside in, we would be like patting him on the back. We'd be like, John, you're killing it. He's got almost 20 employees, making several $1 million a year, at least in gross, money coming in. And they're profitable, they're making money, they're servicing their clients, and they're growing. And so to us, we'd be like, man, he's doing really, really well. But unfortunately, like most people that start a business, he's worked for the last 3, almost 4 years, 70 hours a week, 70 plus. And so he started working with me, and these were his words. He said, "I need to learn how to trust my employees and delegate work to them because I'm putting on the boss hat, but I'm also putting on the individual contributor hat." He's doing a lot of the work. He's micromanaging his people. Now, John, he knew what he needed to do. He needed to trust and delegate. He told me that, right? And yet he's not able to do it. And the reason he wasn't able to do it is because he was chasing new outcomes with an old identity.
Mm.
And so his definition of success for him that he was kind of using to fuel this next phase of his life as business owner and boss and president of the company was coming from his past experience. So his definition of success in the past was like put your head down, work hard, get the work done, put in the time, and he didn't let go of that. And really, what he needed to do was kind of shed that skin, so to speak,
Mhm.
and like a snake does, shed the skin and evolve into something new and better. And he needed to fully put on this hat or this identity of I'm the boss, I'm the leader, and not in a like a dictator kind of way or like I'm in charge or an ego driven way, more of like I'm here to empower my employees to trust them, to delegate, and to allow them to learn how to do what I learned how to do early in my career. And again, he had to kind of get out of his own way. So his new definition of success uh, abandoned the idea that he had to do the work himself. And the new definition was more of I'm here to empower and to lead. And by doing that, it's a win-win because his employees get to grow and learn and develop, and then he gets to not have to work 70 hours a week, right? And so it was a win-win for the whole company.
I love that example, Jake. Thank you. So let's walk through this example, with John. I'm curious. I'm always curious to hear why people think they're a slave to their work. What factors do you think went into John's story, if you will, to lead up to the point where he's like, I need to go do my own thing, if you will? Why do people feel like a slave to their work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I personally would use the word slave. He probably did, and other people do. It's kind of an extreme term. For me, and I'll talk about John too, but for me, in my experience working, in corporate America, working a 9 to 5, was I felt, again, it didn't start this way. I love my roots in engineering. I love the companies that I have worked for and that I still currently work for. But again, I'm trying to close that gap between like what I find is success and how I'm showing up and trying to align those things. And so I think, in my experience, it's when those things are out of alignment that cause us to feel just kind of stuck or like we're not progressing in the way that we want to progress. And maybe we're progressing in the way the company wants us to progress, but not individually. And I think for John, it was similar, but maybe a little bit more extreme, where he was like, his goal was if I run my own business, I can set my family up for financial, freedom in the future. And, we all have this pie in the sky idea of like, eventually I'll just work 10 hours a week and the company will kind of run itself. And I think that's possible if you do things the right way and set up your company the right way. But unfortunately, a lot of us, we don't ever get to that part. We say eventually, but we're like, but not right now. I'm going to run it this way right now, and I'm going to do all the work, and we never put the systems in place to really capitalize on scaling back. In fact, all he did was scale up, right? He just spent more and more time on his business. And so, ironically, when he said he was kind of a slave to his 9 to 5, he became even more of a slave to the company that he created. And that's why he hired me, because he said on the first time we met, he said, I have a year left of doing this before, like I have a year runway left before I can't do this anymore. I have a wife and 5 kids and I only have so much left in the tank. Right. And so I'm so glad that he reached out, that we were able to work through some of those things. There's a happy ending to that story. He's working on himself. He's scaling back. Our one of the first things that we did working with him was like, you got to take a day off. Like you haven't
Mm.
taken a day off in years. And that's not just close your laptop and walk away. Like you have to set that up for success. You have to delegate to your employees, tell them what they need to do while you're gone, have somebody in charge, put those systems in place. He took one day off and I said, watch, when you get back, the building will still be there. The clients will be there. It'll be okay. And in fact, your employees will be a little bit more empowered to handle things on their own. Right. And then the next step was to take 2 consecutive days off. And then by the time I
Mm.
was done working with him, I said, "You gotta take a whole week off, not answer your phone, don't take your laptop, and go spend time with your wife and kids." This sounds like super common sense, like no-brainer stuff. Like, he had to hire me to tell him this, but it's always easy when somebody else is telling you. It's the hardest to take our own medicine, right?
So I'm just wondering, Jake, I love this a lot. John went through this thing and realized, I'm a slave to my work. Now he runs a team. I'm just curious, the work that you followed up on with him. Is he like taking these lessons and applying it now to the company so people don't feel the way he did? Right. Leadership is in such a critical spot, right? I like how you said it. Like we're kind of, comparing how the company thinks we're progressing versus how we want to progress. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. This is a great question. John, as we were wrapping up our coaching towards the tail end there, I had this idea and I said, "Hey, what if you've got 15, 20 employees, however many he had?" I said, "What if, you've got a lot of benefit from this. You're trying to evolve into this leader, this business owner and empower your employees." I said, "What if we did like a group coaching with your employees? Pick your top 5 or 6 employees that you see as like the future leaders of the company and allow me to come in and teach them some of the same principles that I taught you so they know where you're headed and then they also can be empowered." And I also said, and the biggest thing for him was that it's like, you don't have to do it because again, I'm not trying to give him another thing to take on. It was like, I'll take it. I'll teach them. You can do follow-up and stuff like that, but again, like, work through other people. That's his role now, is to work through other people, not to actually do all the work. And so I love it. I love doing that with John and other people and trying to be empowering in the workplace. I think it's difficult sometimes that we want to be in alignment, but the company has its vision and its goals. And what I tell leaders within a company is that the best way to lead people, nobody wants to be managed. Nobody wants to be managed. We manage projects and budgets and schedules and deadlines. We don't manage people, even though we say project managers or you have a manager. We should be leading people. Everyone wants to be led. Nobody wants to be managed. And I think the easiest thing, or not easiest, but one of the most simple things that somebody in a management or a leadership role should be doing is talking to the people that they're in charge of and figuring out what success means to them in their role and within the company.
I
Not
love
what the
that.
company wants them to do, but what they want, right?
Love that, Jake. So one of the things we say in the show here is that success is not a matter of good luck, it's good skills. Can you build that skill of, leaders doing exactly that?
Yeah, you can build any skill. And I think skill's an interesting word. I like the word. I would probably some of these weird things that we talk about that don't seem like skills, like one that I encourage people to do quite frequently is to slow down. We're really, really busy all the time. And there's a time to be busy and there's a time to go fast and execute and all that stuff. But there's also a time to slow down and to think and reflect and allow that mental dust to settle. And so things like that, like slowing down, we often don't think like, oh, that's a skill. I would say it's a practice, right? And we practice things to get better at them. And so definitely that's definitely a skill that we can practice and get better at.
No, I love that. It's so interesting, right? Like coaching, I've heard, talk to other coaches on the show and they kind of say similar things in that it's not always like coaching, I mean, not their strengths, but it's also like coaching to the skill of slowing down. Like,
Hmm.
why is it important for us to slow down today?
We do too many things, and when we do too many things, we actually make very little progress on anything. And so one of my mentors is like, he told me, if you have more than 4 priorities, 3 or 4 priorities, you have none. Right? And so we try to juggle all these balls. We love multitasking and trying to like do all these different things. And in reality, when we do that, we make no meaningful progress on the things that are most important. And so whether that's in work or at home or whatever it may be, I highly encourage people to find the 3 or 4 most important, highest priorities, not all within work. There's a framework that I learned from a guy named Richie Norton. He wrote a book called Anti-Time Management, which drastically changed the way that I see how I use my time. And he has a framework in there called the 4 Ps. And it's a really simple exercise. Your listeners can do it. I've done it a million times, but you write on a piece of paper, you write down these 4 Ps: personal, people, play, and professional. And under each one of those 4 things, write down all the things that are important to you, your top priorities, not even top priorities, just priorities in each of those categories. Spend 5 minutes doing that. At the end of 5 minutes, in each category, you'll have 4. Circle the top one. It's difficult to do because, especially in the people one, I'm married, I have 4 kids, I have my parents, I have people that I care about, and to circle one, and sometimes it's not my wife, right? I'm like, it's my son or it's my brother or whoever it may be, and you feel bad because you're like, but my wife is important, and it's like, no, all the people and all the things on your list that you just read out are important. But again, if you focus on all of them, you'll make no progress on any of them. So build a project around the 4 most important things. And those projects can be temporary, like they could be several weeks or months or even one day or whatever it may be. Focus on that and make that your priority. And yeah, I think that's a recipe for success right there.
I love that. So, Jake, this is the Work Sucks, but I Like It podcast. What is one thing that sucks right now in your work, and what are you doing to make it not suck? Maybe
Oh,
it's time management.
this is so fantastic. I like it. I wasn't prepared for this. What's one thing that sucks right now in my world, and that I want to make better? Right? I mentioned this earlier. By the way, I like the "work sucks" line. One of my favorite bands is Blink 182,
Oh, cool. My
and
girlfriend's the same. Yeah, yeah.
and their like probably biggest song is "All the Small Things," and I've been to several concerts of theirs, and if there's one line that the crowd knows, it's the line in there that says "Work sucks, I know," and the band always gets quiet and everybody yells it, and it's just like a very nostalgic thing. So again, there's this love-hate relationship with work. But I think it's interesting that when, again, we're in alignment with work that even is hard, but it's work that we are intentional about and want to show up for, that it tends to not suck, right? And it tends to be hard and difficult and grueling sometimes, but deep meaning is there. And so what I'm really trying to do, I guess, to answer your question, what sucks right now that I'm trying to pivot or change on or improve is a lot of the just logistical things that I do in my business with Actively Human. I tend to overthink stuff. Like I've redone my website like 10 times. I keep like changing different copy and different wording on different things. And it's like, you know what? Good enough is good enough,
Mm.
and just move on. I think that's a lesson we could all take. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite there, but it's not that it sucks. It's that I'm spending my time on things that don't really matter, right? And this is kind of this internal thing of like getting in my own way. It's like find the things that move the needle and work on those things, and don't spend time on the other stuff. And so it sucks in regards to like it's just not worth it, right?
No, I love that. There was a previous guest on the show talked about how we find ourselves talking more about the work than doing the work itself sometimes, right? And that's
Exactly.
especially this
Go.
day and age. He called it the signal to noise ratio. It's just
Yep.
like a lot of noise out there, and we got to get our signal out, if you will. Man, that's funny. Jay, can you walk us through how you came up with actively human? I love the term active. So I think of Zig Ziglar and Jackie Robinson with their quotes about, saying that life is really not a spectator sport, it's an active one. You got to be involved. Can you walk us through how you came up with actively human. I really like that word choice there.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's very intentional. I'll walk you back about 2 years ago when I started coaching. And again, this goes to this idea of like, you know, I'm not where I'm supposed to be in my career, or not supposed to be, but I want to do something different, but I don't know what, and I want to take control of my own destiny and maybe work for myself. And it's a huge mountain to climb. And so oftentimes people just don't do anything, and they just go back to their day to day and what's familiar and what's comfortable. And so for me, it was like, no, I cannot do that. I'm at the point where I just got to take the next step. Right. And I started a company, I formed an LLC, and it was called Actively Human, and it just kind of stuck. It was one of those things that just sounded right and it was good. But my company, nobody knew that. That was just the name of my company, like kind of behind closed doors. My forward facing, client facing company was called Human Engineer Coach. That was my URL. It was humanengineercoach.com. It was great. I was targeting engineers, which again I love working with, and I work with a lot of them. But over the last year or so, or the last 2 years, I've pivoted a little bit just because um, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into just working with engineers, although I love doing that. And so at some point I was like, instead of being so niche and so specific, why don't I open that up a little bit to more of a general audience, that of people that are kind of mid-career, that are going through these transitions, that are trying to figure out what's their next thing, and abandon, the old identity of human engineer coach only. And I was like, what do I call the company? I don't know. And then in the back of my mind, I knew it's like the LLC that you formed like 2 years ago that's called Actively Human. And so again, human engineer coach, that human element was always in the name. Actively human, that was always there. But like you said, I like the term active because it emphasizes the intentionality and the purpose behind what you're doing. And also this element of like what we said earlier with work, like the effort that goes into it, and that you're putting in the reps, but in the direction that you want to go.
I love that. So it's funny, Jake. I had a similar website called philosophicalengineering.com. And as I mentioned it
Awesome.
to people, they were like, they didn't know how to spell it. So I was like, you know what? I was like, okay, this has got to change. And years went past, and I came up with this thing of work sucks, but I like it. And that's how it landed. So similar kind of story.
I love that. It just happens. It just
Yeah,
happens, right?
right,
Yeah.
right, for sure. So, but Jake, if people in the audience want to reach out to you for your coaching services, where's a good spot for them to land?
That's great. I want to give your audience a free resource. It's called the Own Your Life Playbook. So there's some very conceptual things in there, but also some practical takeaways and actionable items that they can do today. If any of this resonated with them, again, it's called the Own Your Life Playbook, and they can go to activelyhuman.com/hashtag playbook. They'll put their name and email in there. It's a free resource. I'll also be able to connect with them if they want to chat. They can find me on LinkedIn or on my website, activelyhuman.com.
Well, Jake, thanks so much. Thanks for the gift, and thanks for being on the show.
Hey,
Appreciate
Tony,
it.
it was great. This is great. I appreciate you having me here.
One of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is that success has to be defined intentionally, or it will be defined for you. Strengthening the columns of your life isn't about doing more, it's about doing what actually supports the lifestyle you want to live. And while it's easy to give advice to others, taking your own medicine is often the hardest part. Remember, success is not good luck, it's good skills. Today, the skill is to assess what your columns are in life. What are your beams? If you want to learn more about this, listeners of the show will get a discount when working with Jake by using the code WORKSUCKS at activelyhuman.com/pound sign cohort to get $200 off. Pretty solid offer for some important foundational work. Thanks for listening to Work Sucks, but I like it. Until next time, keep strengthening your foundation and building a life that can actually support the way you want to live.